All right, so far we have talked about psychodynamic theory of personality or psychoanalytic, whichever one you want to call it. They're different, but for the purpose of this class, they're not really. It looks at personality in terms of unconscious forces within us, particularly sex and aggression. Okay, we've talked about trait theory, which looks to see how individuals differ from one another and identifies certain traits. It does not attempt to explain anything. It just tells you what. Okay. And then we talked about the social cognitive perspective of personality, reciprocal determinism, the idea that our personality is sort of an interaction between how we think, how we have our conditioning, our behavior, and our environment. Now we're going to talk about the last two, okay, the humanistic and self theories. And they're kind of the same thing. So, the earliest field of psychology, and we can just talk about personality in terms of general psychology because that's basically what psychology is looking at people, okay, and how we behave, and that's our personality. The earliest field of psychology is what's called the first wave, which is the psychoanalytic perspective. The second wave is behavioral, okay, looking at how the environment influences our behavior, how reward and punishment, conditioning, things like that. Right? And then following behaviorism comes what is referred to as the third wave, which is humanism. Humanism was founded in the 1950s by Abraham Maslow, and then it is expanded on later by a guy named Carl Rogers. And what humanism looked to focus on was, so the humanists were they didn't like the negativity of psychoanalysis of Freud, basically saying that humans are inherently evil, right? And it didn't like the impersonality of behaviorism, okay? Because behaviorism basically says we have no free will, okay? And we're all just kind of cogs in a machine. And we're all just kind of spinning around and we think we know why, but we don't actually know why. Humanism looked to focus on the individual, okay, where the other ones kind of look at groups. All right, humanism looked to focus on the individual and our potential. Okay, humanism says that we are self-determined, meaning we have free will and choice, and that our behavior is focused around, our personality is focused around reaching our potential, our growth. It is very positive. It is very sort of like hippie-ish. It's kind of like, let's all hold hands. Everybody's beautiful. Everybody's special. Everybody's their own snowflake. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. And it's just focused on our potential for growth and how our behavior plays, our personality plays into that. So we've talked about that before. So it's founded in the 1950s by Abraham Maslow. And Maslow's main idea, something that we've talked about already, is the hierarchy of needs. That our behavior is motivated by fulfilling these certain needs and ultimately seeking to become the best becoming self-actualized, reaching the top of the hierarchy. Now, Maslow developed this theory by studying people that he deemed to be healthy people. People such as Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi. Okay? People that he believed were self-actualized, but also he believed that they were self-actualized based on his own values. Now, does anybody see an issue with this? It's extremely subjective. Okay? This is all based on what Maslow believed to be self-actualization. Now, Maslow and I kind of share the same. Like Abraham Lincoln is one of my favorite people in history. It's kind of between him and Anthony Bourdain is like my two favorites. Okay, but so I may have the same values and say, all right, those are Abraham Lincoln is somebody that I see as reaching his full potential. But what if somebody else idolizes Donald Trump and believes that Trump is somebody that has reached his full potential? Would that be a difference in values in what we see as being self-actualized? Yes. Yeah. Because Lincoln and Trump, although both presidents, that is really the only thing that they have in common. They're both tall. Okay, that's about it. Oh yeah. I don't know if he's 6'6", but I think he's like 6'3", 6'4". Same height as Lincoln. Different bodies, same height, I think. Okay, so a lot of this is based off of his own values. But Maslow said that self-actualized people all had certain things in common. First off, he said that they're problem-centered, meaning when there is a problem, they can sort of take their own personal values out of it and just simply focus on the problem at hand. So they have a strong sense of personal control, what is referred to as an internal locus of control. But they feel that they are in control of their own destiny. They are self-aware, meaning they understand what they are good at and what they are bad at. And they accept themselves for that. And then one of the other big ones, and this, a lot of times we sort of equate having a lot of friends with being like very successful and whatnot. But does anybody know anybody who like is obsessed with making it seem like they are friends with everyone? Okay, or maybe they do have a lot of friends, but they don't have any like real, but none of them are like really good friends. Yeah. Okay. Maslow said that actually people that are self-actualized only have a few deep relationships. Okay, they are more focused on having deep relationships than having a lot of relationships. So people that are self-actualized might only have a few friends, but they have really good friends, rather than a lot of friends that are just friends on a superficial level. And then finally, and this one is really important, people that are self-actualized are okay with being unpopular. They understand that You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. All right. Sometimes when you're making big decisions, you're going to piss some people off, and that's okay with them. You ever watch the movie Lincoln? Okay. Lincoln was he understood that he was going to make a lot of people mad with decisions that he made, but he believed that they were the right decisions, so he still did them. Sometimes, we gotta make unpopular decisions about things. Like, huh? Yeah. All right. So those are the qualities of self-actualized people. So after Maslow comes, so Maslow is more of a philosopher than a psychologist. After Maslow comes a guy named Carl Rogers. Why do we only have 26 people on this? Carl Rogers is a therapist. Okay, yeah, Ryan, that's fine. Just come back in. Those meetings only take like 5 minutes. Okay, Carl Rogers is a therapist, and we'll talk more about him next unit when we talk about therapy. All right, but he turned the humanistic perspective into a field of psychology and a field of clinical psychology, and he called it person-centered therapy or client-centered therapy. And he just basically took Maslow's ideas and turned them into a therapy method. The main idea with Rogers is that people are basically good. Freud said we're all basically bad. Rogers said we're all basically good. And that we're like acorns. Okay? An acorn has the potential to become an oak tree, but they just need to be in the right environment. Need to have the correct circumstances. They need to have water. They need to have nutrients. They need to have sun. If they have all those things, they will all grow into big oaks. It is a nice thought. Yeah. Maslow or Rogers, we'll watch a video of him next unit. Rogers is he's very soft spoken, very nice. You could see him, basically in therapy. Like it wouldn't be a surprise if he just sparked up a joint in the middle of therapy. Okay, all right, because he has that kind of okay. And he said that humans, what we need, like an oak tree needs water, nutrients, and sun. Humans need genuineness, meaning we need to be able to be our real self, and we need other people to be their real selves to us. We need empathy, meaning we need others to be able to feel what we are feeling, to empathize with us, and vice versa. And then we need acceptance. And I'll save that for last because the next slide deals more with this idea of acceptance. Does anybody have any questions about that before we get into acceptance and unconditional positive regard? All right, so he said that we need acceptance, and what he referred to this as was unconditional positive regard, meaning there should not be any conditions on others accepting us. What this means is that we need to have a caring, non-judgmental attitude towards others, and that others need to have a non-judgmental attitude towards us. When we watch him, we'll watch him do therapy. And one of the things that he does, it's called active listening, but one of the things that he does, he doesn't tell you anything. He doesn't give insight into your own behavior. All he does is go, I understand, Okay. Basically, what he said is that we need to be able, we need to be able to confess our worst and thoughts and still be accepted for them. A lot of the focus here is on the child-parent relationship. Humanists are very interested in childhood, just not in the same like weird sex way that Freud was. All right, they're more interested in childhood in that parents need to be accepting of their children. Now, this doesn't mean that if Aiden gets a DUI, that his parents are like, that's okay, you're okay, that's not a big deal, like blah, blah, blah. Okay. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that that you can do anything wrong and there's no repercussions for it. What this means is that if Aiden gets a DUI, his parents are like, yeah, you screwed up, okay? You messed up, that's not good, but we still care about you and we still love you. Okay? We can't have what are called no conditions of worth. Meaning, like, if your parents only pay attention to you when you get good grades, can't have that. Or when they only get you ice cream, you're only allowed to get ice cream if you have a good game. Okay? You got to be accepted no matter what. All right, are there any questions there? And we need this because, sorry, I'm eating a chicken biscuit. And we need this because we need to be accepted by others before we can accept ourselves. All right, so this acceptance by others goes into what is called our self-concept. Our self-concept is just the idea of who we are. Is it positive? Do we have a positive self-concept? Are we an acorn that we think is just going to get eaten by a squirrel? Or are we an acorn that is going to say, I'm going to get into the sun and I'm going to become a oak tree? Humanism is a little bit too positive. A little bit too positive. What? Yeah. So our self-concept, our idea of ourselves, as we said, it is based around this unconditional positive regard. And Roger said that we have two selves. We have what is called our real self, which is who we are. And then we have what is called our ideal self, which is who we want to be. And for these two, our goal is for our real self and our ideal self to be, if it's a Venn diagram, okay, for these two to completely overlap. And to do this, we need to have unconditional positive regard. this leads to what is called, when the two completely overlap, meaning who we are is who we want to be, is called congruence. Basically the exact same thing as self-actualization. Rogers just uses different terms. When they don't match up, such as right here, okay, if there's only a little bit of overlap, right, that is what is called incongruence. Okay, they don't match up, and this is what causes us anxiety and depression. For them to match up, we need to be accepted for who we are. What are you trying to say? I can't. Well, this goes along with unconditional positive regard.
Well, yeah, I was talking about the guy before.
Oh, Maslow?
Yeah, he was a little bit too conditional.
Yeah, yes. That was, yeah. I think Rogers' theory is definitely gets broader, and it's not based on to like case studies. It's like I think there is truth to this. It's just that sometimes like the whole idea of like being accepted for sometimes people just need to be like, hey, you're just wrong. Something like, all right. So, anybody got any questions about that? We're almost done with humanism. All right. So, last slide. Okay, criticism of the humanistic perspective. One thing, it's too vague. Okay, it's too vague. It's probably just Maslow's own values, and it is not easily testable. Meaning it is not empirical. There's not scientific evidence for it. It is too focused on the individual. Okay, because it is very much just like you do you. You got to do what you need to do to become your best self. Sometimes we don't need to do that. Sometimes we got to say, all right, well, I got to do something that is going to help the group rather than myself. All right, so it is a little bit too self-indulgent. And then it is very much too naive and optimistic. Unrealistic optimism is not good. We got to be. Okay, and it ignores the human capacity for evil. Right? How do we explain somebody like Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler in terms of the humanistic perspective? We're not all good. Go insane?
Yeah, didn't he wasn't he part of a gas attack?
He was wounded, gas attack, but I don't think that really. I think he was angry that he wasn't able to finish out the war. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about the gas attack.
That's what I thought. I might have just heard that.
Yeah, it was more so after World War I with Hitler, and he just failed at absolutely everything that he tried to do. And so people who do that, like
He was successful.
yes, well, he failed at everything else other than being a dictator. But he wanted to be an artist.
Yeah, he found that artist.
Yeah, but he was a terrible artist. Probably, yeah. Okay, all right, so are there any questions about humanism? Pretty straightforward. All right, now, an offshoot of humanism these two used to be combined and they're not anymore, is what is called the self-focused perspective. It is part of what is now called positive psychology, which is focusing on how do we make ourselves better. Martin Seligman is the main guy behind this. So this one says that the self is kind of the center of our personality. The self is just who we are at our core. See here, there's a 17-year-old Billy Hook's self. All right, and it says that we have a couple different possible selves. We have ideas about ourselves. Okay, we have the self that we dream to be, and the self that we fear that we will become. We dream to be you dream to be a doctor, but you're afraid you might be homeless. Okay.
Watching like thing where you write down. He says write down if you keep going down the path you're going on right now, where you are most afraid to be in 5 years, and then write down in your life where you want to be in 5 years.
Yeah, that's the possible selves. Okay, and he said that these are basically the motivating factors for us. That we want to be motivated to become our dream self. Now, there's a lot of positivity in this, and there's a lot of value in focusing on ourselves and on our own personal growth. But sometimes a little bit too much focus on ourselves makes us a little bit too self-centered. Now, who in here has ever done something like maybe you did something in class, like I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that teenagers would find embarrassing. What's something that you could do in class that you would find that would be embarrassing? No, I don't think that's embarrassing. Uh-huh. Crying. Okay, all right. All right. Maybe farting in class. Yeah, well, I think that's something that most people would notice. But we have a tendency, like, anyone here's ever done something embarrassing, and you're like, oh my God, I can never go back to that class again. Everybody's making fun of me. Everybody's is laughing at me behind my back. And then you come to realize that actually nobody was even paying attention. And nobody even noticed. Yeah. This is what is, and this is, yeah, maybe tripping in the hallway. All right. And this is very much like everybody knows this, the teenagers especially do this. Okay. This is what's called the spotlight effect. Okay. Spotlight effect is our tendency to overestimate how much others are paying attention to us. Okay. To overestimate how much, if you're wearing something that you don't think looks good. All right, you think, oh my God, everybody thinks I look like shit right now. Well, in reality, probably nobody's really even paying. Okay. Teenagers do this a lot because teenagers have what is called adolescent egocentrism, which is sort of the second wave of, you're egocentric until about the age of 5. And then as a teenager, you're kind of egocentric as well, but in a different sense, in that you just think that you're way more important than you actually are in the grand scheme of things. Think about the things that you tell yourself about yourself in your head. Exactly. You're the protagonist in your story. It's called the personal fable. Okay? So, and everybody does it. All right. Any questions there? All right. So, one of the big things that goes into the self is self esteem, our feelings of high or low self worth. Now, what do we think? Does having high self esteem believing in yourself and does that affect performance in something? Does high self-esteem affect how you? If you have high self-esteem, will you perform better? Something. What do we think? Huh? Think so? Okay. There's a difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy. Believing we will succeed. But this is interesting. The answer there is sometimes it does. They did an interesting study where students that were the week before students took a test, they got praise from the teacher. They got self-esteem boosting messages every day before the test, saying you're going to do great, blah, blah, blah. You all are so excellent. I know you're going to do fantastic. Do you think they did better on the test because of that? They actually did worse. They actually overall did worse than they normally did when their self-esteem was boosted before the test. Why might that be? Anybody have a guess? Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes when we believe in ourselves so much, we fail to do the things that make us. Just being told that we will succeed does not mean that we will succeed. Okay, we got to do things to help ourselves succeed. So there's self-esteem, which is our feelings of high or low self-worth. And then there is what is called self-efficacy. This term is very, very important. It has come up like every single year for the past like 4 or 5 years on FRQs. Self-efficacy is our belief in our ability to succeed at something. For instance, high self-efficacy in academics does actually predict performance in academics. Believing that we will succeed in academics most of the time, right? As long as you have the preparation there, but a lot of times that's the belief that we will succeed goes along with preparing for it. Okay, now, which one comes first? Does believing in yourself, your high or low opinion of yourself, come before believing you will succeed? Or does self-efficacy come before your opinion of yourself? What do we think? Okay, right. Esteem before. Okay, the answer is there's not really an answer. Okay, sometimes just simply having low self-esteem does not necessarily predict that you will not believe you will succeed. People can have low self-esteem, but know like, hey, I know that I'm good at this thing, so I know that I will succeed at this thing. So, just like everything else in this class, the answer is somewhat. All right. So, what are some of the benefits and costs of self-esteem? Having high self-esteem is good, but it's not always good, and it's not always good to have too high self-esteem. Some of the benefits. All right, people with high self-esteem are generally more accepting of others. Okay, people who feel good about themselves also feel good about other people. Good. Yep. Yep. Okay, but they've also found that people with low self-esteem tend to be more likely to disparage others, meaning like talk shit about them. I don't know how this correlates, but they tend to be more racist. Yeah, it's kind of like a scapegoat thing, I think. Or they have more racial bias. Right? And then they also tend to spend more time online. Specifically, like everybody knows somebody who just like, everybody knows somebody who like everything that they do, they document on their Instagram story. Yes, I know it's miserable. All right, even adults my age do it. Like literally nobody cares. Okay, or they just take selfies all the time. Yeah, I hope Instagram doesn't become like Facebook. Facebook. Well, I know, but Facebook is just awful. Yeah, yeah, Twitter. Yeah, again, just that spotlight effect. Right? People don't care as much about what you are doing and thinking as you think that they do. Some people do care, but I don't. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, but some of the costs of high self-esteem. Excessive optimism can make us blind to risks. So, like Aiden said, like being very accepting of other people, all right, can have a downside, all right, because you may be too trusting of other people. All right, and people who think everything's going to work out, everything doesn't always work out. So we got to take that into account. And then lastly, something that we've talked about a lot so far, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Just because you have high self-esteem does not mean that you are actually good at something. Okay? Dunning-Kruger effect we've talked about is, people with low cognitive ability tend to vastly overestimate their cognitive ability. A lot of times, the most overconfident people are the ones that are actually the least competent. And a lot of times, the people who are the most competent are not confident in their abilities. Or they think that they underestimate, and that's because they think that everybody else is like as good at something as they are. Oh, did you cheat?
No.
Okay,
I was just sitting there like second guessing myself.
yeah. A lot of times that is like, I know that I know psychology well. But a lot of times, like, I will like second guess myself on things. So we are ignorant to our own incompetence a lot of the time, especially people with low cognitive ability. And then just think about it, like these are the people that like come out of a test and they're like, oh yeah, I think I missed like 2 or 3, but I think I did great on that. Then they get it back and they got like a 50 on it. And you're like, what is the what's not clicking right there?
Does that have anything to do with like people lying to themselves about like what they want to be?
Sure,
I
yeah.
can't remember what it was called when we did it earlier. About like people who convince themselves of something else about themselves, like lying to yourself about something.
Is there a term for it?
I don't know.
I'm sure that's come up, yeah. A couple of the other costs, all right, with self-serving bias. Self-serving bias is our human tendency, and this is normal, to perceive ourselves very favorably, right? As Aiden said, like we are the protagonist in our own story. So we perceive ourselves very favorably. So they did a study, I don't know what year it was, but they surveyed 829,000 high school seniors, which is a massive sample size. And they asked them, how many of you, who thinks that they are below average in their ability to get along with other people? Okay, who would rate themselves as below average in their ability to get along with other people? Take a guess in the chat or whatnot. What percentage do you think rated themselves as below average in their ability to get along with other people? Just put a percentage in the chat. And think about this. This is an example of self-serving bias. So, there you go. 30. All right. Nobody's even close. Less than 1% rated themselves as below average in their ability to get along. Less than 1% rated themselves in the bottom 50%. Okay? And they see this all over the place. Right? People who start their own business, right, believe that their business will succeed, but others will fail. When in fact, like something like 80% of new businesses fail within like the first year. Okay? We also tend to, when we succeed at something, it is because of our ability. But when we fail at something, it's because of what? I mean, if we are real with ourselves, then yes, but think about it in athletics. What? Okay, if your team wins, then it's because you played well, right? But if your team loses, you're gonna blame it on someone else. All right, it's because everybody else played like shit, or the refs sucked, or this person didn't come off this pick right, okay, or the coach didn't call the right plays or whatnot.
There's like a out there, but the guy's like, yeah, he's like playing on basketball. I'm playing if he gets like credit for the victory, he gets credit for the loss.
Oh, yeah.
So like, what about the 20 points he scored in the other team's goal?
Yeah. All right. So self-serving bias, we tend to see ourselves as better than average, and when we succeed, it's because we are good at something. When we fail, it's because somebody else screwed up. All right. And then one of the other costs of high self-esteem is narcissism. Okay. Now, there's a difference between being narcissistic and having what is called narcissistic personality disorder, which we'll talk about next unit, but where narcissism is the key feature of a person's personality. But narcissism is when it's just excessive self-love and self-absorption. People that are narcissistic are obsessed with themselves. Okay, they think the spotlight is always on them. They think that everybody should be paying attention to them all the time. That is people that post stuff on social media nonstop probably fall a little bit into that narcissistic category. Yes, yeah, they think they're in the Truman Show. The thing in the Truman Show, you didn't even realize he was in the Truman Show. So, yeah, people haven't seen that movie. That Truman Show is a great movie. Yeah. Okay, so what is interesting though about narcissists is narcissists, when criticized, narcissists are much more likely to be aggressive towards somebody else when they are criticized. Because, right, narcissists, when criticized, narcissism is a shell. And it is a very thin shell. And when a narcissist is criticized, you think of somebody that we saw for 4 years do this. Okay? When a narcissist is criticized, that punctures that thin shell, that thin veneer, punctures their bubble. Right? And narcissists, at their core, they project this image of being confident and whatnot because at their core, narcissists tend to be extremely, crap, I'm blanking on the word. Insecure. Yes. Narcissists at their core tend to be extremely insecure. And so actually a reaction formation where they act overly confident because they are deeply, deeply insecure. They do. Narcissists generally have extremely low self-esteem, but they act like it's what's called an inferiority complex. They try to act superior because they feel inferior. Now, there's narcissists, which are people like this. Narcissistic personality disorder is a different thing, and those people are extremely dangerous a lot of the time. Okay, but uh, yes, yeah, that's some like Bundy would fall into NPD. All right, so are there any questions about any of that? One more slide. All right, culture and the self. So how we view ourselves is also part of our individual culture. Right? And there are kind of two different ways that this affects the view of ourselves. Individualistic cultures. Individualistic cultures are cultures that give priority to your own personal goals over the good of the group. Right? The individual is more important than the group. So in these types of cultures, if something is good for you, but could negatively affect the group, that doesn't really matter. Okay? As long as it is positive for you. Right? And group cultures like this, their identification is more with their own personal attributes rather than group attributes or family attributes. Um, People in these types of cultures focus less on group harmony and they are not as connected to certain groups. Anybody know what cultures would be, or what countries would be considered individualistic? Yeah. Okay. Individualistic cultures are generally considered to be more Western. Right? The United States is just think about the American dream, the like individuals pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. It's nonsense. Okay, but if you think about like the U.S., everything is all right. How does this affect me? Right? It would probably be better overall for the group if we made assault rifles illegal. Like if we said, all right, people don't need to have it. But people are like, don't say it's my personal Second Amendment's my personal right to own a gun. Okay, to do this. All right, and how it affects the individual is bigger in the U.S. than how it affects the group. Collectivistic cultures are ones that sort of the individual, the group is more important than the individual. And group harmony is more important than the individual, than like individual success. Like that with these cultures, their identity is more tied up in like family. Anybody know what cultures would uh, fall into this? Well, yeah, but that's more in terms of like communism. But yes, it was. It is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Communism is collective. Yeah, Eastern cultures. All right. Asian, like especially Far East. I don't think India would really fall into this. Um, but like China, Japan, those countries are considered to be very. And if we want to think about these in terms of just a very prescient example, think about the different responses to COVID in different areas, right? We're still at a point in the US where people are like It's my right to not wear a piece of cloth on my face. My body, my choice. It's funny when that's the case for them a lot of the time, but then when it comes to other people's bodies and other people's choices, they don't have. Right? Whereas in like New Zealand basically said, all right, we're shutting everything down. Nobody's coming in. Nobody's going out. You're going to stay in your house for a month. And everybody was like, sounds good. All right. And they basically eradicated the virus within the first 2 months of COVID. Whereas we're still like, we're at the point now where we're not even through it. And we have some states like Texas saying they're basically about to outlaw masks down there. So what's good for the group versus what's good for the individual. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yes. Yeah. There's most. Sure. Yes. But we a lot of times put more value on our own individual rights, how something affects us versus how it affects the entire group. Okay. All right, guys. So